almost $350,000 in interest. You're paying for that house twice. You're paying for two houses, but you only get to keep one of them, all right? You're paying for the house twice. And the way that Santos in our training of Renatus kind of explains it, and it's a ballpark figure. If you do this, if you take the interest rate, double it and add a zero, that's about the percent of total interest that you'd pay over the lifetime of a 30-year loan. So what does that mean? So if we take 6%, we double it, it's what?
12.
We add a zero, it's 120. That's about 120% of the original loan. Now, it's not exactly, but it's pretty close. If you want to know how much interest am I going to pay in a 30-year amortized loan based on the interest rate, let's do that exercise again. What about 4.5%? How much are you going to need? 90, right? Because you double it as 9, you add a zero, it's 90%. Okay? In an amortized loan, for 30 years, depends on the interest rate, but about 5 or 6%. What year out of the 30 years are you about halfway paid off?
20.
Okay? Gosh, Martin, too smart. 20, yes. 20, 21 years, depending on the interest rate. Think about that. You're paying on that mortgage for 20 years before you just get to the halfway point. You know, you're 2/3 done paying them, and you've only got a half of it paid off. All right? So this is an amortization schedule. I pulled this off the internet. You can get them, Bob's a big user of an app on his phone to get amortization. I use a very simple website called mortgage-x.com. It's one I just originally started doing years ago. I use it, just cut and paste that. So this is showing the amortization schedule on a 30-year loan. As you can see, after you make that first payment, your principal for the next payment goes up a whole $1.49. All right, we're making ground now. We're getting more principal paid down next month. $1.49. Okay, even if you go here on this graph, I have it for 2 years. After 2 years, it has jumped up a whopping $36.30 after making those payments every single month. All right. And that's on time, no late payments, you're doing everything right, and that's all that the amortization schedule has jumped. There's an additional problem. How many people in the room have either bought a new house in the last 5 to 10 years or refinanced the house in the last 5 or 10 years? Okay? All right? So we're at the beginning of the amortization. This is no longer months, this is now years. So what most people do after 3 or 4 or 5 years, they refinance, thinking that they're doing themselves a favor. They're lured by we can go from 4.5% to 3.5%. You're knocking off a whole percent. The problem is, though, you're restarting the amortization schedule. And if you don't cut your years down, you're actually going to be able, and you make every payment, you're going to pay more interest refinancing than what you would have if you would have stayed with the 1% higher, but further along in the amortization schedule, okay? Now, if you do refinance, the smart way to do it is you knock down those years. Forget about a 30. Ask them about a 25 if you can, or a 20 or a 15. The problem is that most people, we live to the maximum of our means, and whatever our monthly payment is, we find a way to spend the rest, right? So that's where the motivation and discipline comes, all right? So that's another problem. Now, how are we going to solve these problems? Well, another great quote from Albert Einstein. In order to solve these problems, first of all, what I'm going to talk about, you got to open your mind, because this is not going to be the way you normally think about mortgages and interest rate and so forth. So I'm asking you to open your mind to interest reduction strategy, because, as Albert Einstein stated, we can't solve our problems with the same thinking we use to create them, all right? So if your normal amortized 30-year loan got you into $300,000 of interest, the same thinking's not going to get you out of $300,000 interest. I'm going to open your mind to some concepts that you're going to be like, wait a minute, can that be right? Go home and do the math and come to your own conclusions, because that's what I did when I first saw it myself. There's different types of loans out there, and this doesn't just work with, as I said, with a mortgage. Can work with student loan, car loans, anything that's an amortized loan. That's all these types of loans right here. Those are examples. Well, if you guys would please turn off your phone so it doesn't ring during my presentation, I would appreciate it.
It's a $10 fine.
$10 I made. I'm not a professional speaker anyway.
Randy, Bob Kearney's probably calling you too now.
Yeah. Bob would be ripping $10.
Okay, and then these are lines of credit, all right? So different types of lines of credit. Personal line of credit, credit cards are lines of credit, business lines of credit, which Bob Kearney talks a lot about building business credit. HELOCs, which are home equity lines of credit, I'll talk quite a bit about those. And then secured line of credit.